Mishpatim. It's the second sicha for this week from the project, but it's actually Mishpatim Gimel in the original Chelek, the way it appears. Before we begin, we're just going to say Mazel Tov, a very big Mazel Tov for the released passages on Shabbos, Kain, Yirbu Kahena V'Kahena. We have a number of Mazel Tovs for Hanachas Tefillin today. We have the grandson of our classmate Yehudis Edelman, Mendel Edelman, put on tefillin. We have Sarah, I don't know her last name, but Sarah's son, Mendel, had his Anachas tefillin yesterday, and Chaysara Marazov's grandson, Moshe Nassim Marazov, had his Anachas tefillin. Also, a new granddaughter born to Yehudis Edelman, to her daughter Slava Dubov, and her granddaughter carries her mother's name, Rivka Panina, Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov. And last but not least, Toby Las Karpeld's daughter had her Chumash party today. And that is not an insignificant simcha. That is the way the simcha in learning Torah begins when we're very, very young. So we should only be able to share simchas, and we should have already the complete Yeshua that we're waiting for all of the hostages, for all of our soldiers, for everybody in Israel, for everybody all over the world. Ach Tov v'Chesed. We're going to look to Pasuk Aleph of Perek Chav Daled in Mishpatim. And in Seif Aleph, in the first part of the Sicha, the Rebbe says, B'siyum HaParsha, towards the end of the Parsha, La'acharei shemistayemes b'Torah Parshas Didin, after the Torah delineates the laws that we would call torts, civic or civil matters, Uparshas Hinei Nechi Shalech Malach, and after the Bishop says, I'm going to send an angel to lead you, Mesupar B'Kasov, the Torah tells us, this is Pasuk Aleph, Perek Chav Daled, Ve'el Moshe Amar Alei El Hashem. And to Moshe it was said, go up to Hashem. The Hetik Rashi Min HaKosov as a Teves Ve'el Moshe Amar Alei, and Rashi cites those four words, Ve'el Moshe Amar Alei, and in his commentary he says, Uperush Parsha Zu Nemra Koidem Aseres Hadibros, that what we're going to be learning now, this Parsha, but it doesn't mean the Parsha of the week in the common sense, it means this part, this portion of the Parsha was actually said before the Aseres Hadibros. When? Ubedalid b'Sivan Nemra Loi Alei. It was on the fourth day of Sivan that he was told, go up. Okay, now that's the Rashi. The Rebbe says, and what is the imperative based on Pshuta Shel Mikra, the simple explanation, because Rashi says, so what compels Rashi, who's always concentrated on the Pshat, to say that this comes out of order? And now look between the brackets, not the brackets, the hyphens, v'loi kiperish kama v'kama b'pashtani hamikra, which is different than many of the other commentaries. Sheparshazu nemra b'mkayma la'achri matan Torah. Many of the other commentators, many of the other mefarshim opine that no, there's nothing unusual going on here. That in this pasuk, when it says, and to Moshe was told, go up to Hashem, this is in chronological order. This is not out of order. That Moshe went up after Matan Torah, and this is what it's talking about. So what compels Rashi to say otherwise, that this pasuk is not a chronological order? So the Rebbe says, "Who kedivrei hamefarshim." Rashi is aligning with other commentators who bring one of two reasons as to why this pasuk, there's something going on with this verse. Aleph. The first has to do with the Lashon HaKasav. It has to do with the terminology, with the verbiage. It says, Ve'al Moshe Amar Alei al Hashem. And to Moshe it was said, go up to Hashem. V'loi, and not, Vayomer Hashem el Moshe. It doesn't say, and God said to Moshe, Kemina kakasav b'shar mekaymes, like what is the norm in other places. Mashma, so from this it's understood, she'amar kvar koidem elu aparshas d'la'il, that this verse, that it was said to Moshe, come up to Hashem, was said before the rest of Parshas Mishpatim that precedes it. In other words, Vayomer Hashem el Moshe would have signaled that this is a new subject, that something new is happening. And God said to Moshe, you should do such and such. Ve'al Moshe Amar Alei al Hashem, and to Moshe it was told, go up to Hashem. This terminology signals that this is part of a continued narrative. Okay, so that's one reason the Rebbe cites that compels Rashi to say that this pasuk is not in chronological order. The other is content or context, mitochen haparsha. But also what compels Rashi to say that this is out of chronological order is because hasefer mechayev, logic compels or dictates, loimar, she'inyan nichnesu avasenu labris hamasuba b'parsha udavar shenasa lefnei kabbalas hatayra kachana lekach. Because if you see what comes after this pasuk of Moshe Amar Alei, you see that it's all about a covenant between Hashem and Bnei Yisrael. And logic compels us to conclude that before Hashem would give them the Aseres HaDibros, Hashem would cement the covenant with them. In other words, before you give assets to someone, first you determine that they're going to be your partner in business, etc. In other words, before you give people access, first you have to ascertain who they are in your life, in your dealings, in whatever it is. So it doesn't make any sense that what follows this pasuk should come after Matan Torah. It has to come kahachana lekach. It has to be a preparation. It has to be the preamble. The Rebbe says, okay, good, aval kasha, but it's still difficult. Why? Even though Rashi brings in a number of places the following axiom, that there is no chronological order in the Torah. But still in all it's understood, that this is only cited when there is no other recourse. It's not your first go-to to say that the Torah is written in a zigzag manner, that it's not written in order. That's only if there's no other recourse. V'chein, and also shetzarich liyos tam kol shehu l'shinei haseder. There also has to be a reason for why it's out of order. U'kamoshe matzinu b'perish Rashi, and for instance, we find an example of this, l'dugma, b'perush al pasuk vayamas terach b'charan, on the pasuk, and Terach, the father of Avraham, died in Charan. Shala'achrei shabir Rashi shamisas Terach haisa la'achar sheyatza Avram mecharan. And Rashi brings down that Terach actually died after Avram left Charan, but in the psukim, it makes it sound like he died before. Himshich b'dvarav v'hiksha v'lama hiktim hakasav misasa shel Terach l'tziasa shel Avram. Rashi asks, why is this not in chronological order? Why does the Torah make it sound like Terach died before Avram left, when actually it was the opposite? So v'tzarech lahavim b'nidud didan. So likewise, in this case, we have to understand me'eze tam hutzrucha parsha Parshas Vel Moshe Amar Alei Shenemra Koidim Aseres Adibros Ubedalit Sivan Likosev Shaloi Bimkoima Elarak B'Seif Parshas Mishpatim. So we have to understand what is the reason that this event that Moshe was told to go up, which was told to him before the Aseret HaDibros was given, actually on the fourth day of Sivan, and the Matan Torah was on the sixth day of Sivan. Why was it written out of order? Why was it written at the end of Parshas Mishpatim and not in Yisro where it belongs? Ubefrat, and specifically, Sha'al Pizeh Nimtza Shehemshech HaSipor Ides Matan HaTorah B'Chanis Lezeh Hulachayr Ba'ofen Tamua Ma'od. Especially because based on this, what follows afterwards concerning Matan Torah and the preparations for Matan Torah are presented in the Torah in a very bewildering fashion. Beparshas Yisro Mesupar Des Achanas LaMatan Torah B'Yom Hasheni Beis Sivan B'Yom Shlishi Ubechelko Shel HaRavi L'Chodesh. In Parshas Yisro, we get information about preparations that Bnei Yisrael had to undergo for Matan Torah on Beis Sivan, the second of Sivan, on the third of Sivan, and part of the fourth of Sivan. Ubechlal zeh, and included in this, Tzivui Hashem al Prisha v'Hagbala, Hashem's commandment that they had to cease from having marital intimacy during these preparatory days, and also that there had to be parameters placed around Matan Torah that nobody was able to breach. Vayikdash esa'am, vayomer la'am, hayu nechonim al tigayshu. And these are the psukim that tell us that the nation made themselves holy, and they separated from their spouses, and this was for the purpose of being ready, and that they should not approach Har Sinai. Ula'achar mikein, and after this we get Matan Torah b'yom Shisha or Shiva b'Chodesh. Then we get the story of Matan Torah. V'oides amiras Hashem l'Moshe la'achrei zeh. And then we get what Hashem said to Moshe after. And that includes 6/7 of Parshas Mishpatim. Ubesoif Parshas Mishpatim, Shav HaKosov la'acharav. And at the end, in the seventh Aliyah, actually, not even at the beginning of the seventh Aliyah, but in Perek Chavdal, at the very end of Parshas Mishpatim, the Torah resumes the narrative that was started at the beginning of Parshas Yisro. So it goes backwards. La'asoy b'meurais shebedalet Sivan, to engage with events that happen on the fourth day of Sivan. Haidas Moshe Yisrael al Tavar mitzvahs Prisha v'Hagbala. Again, making mention of Moshe telling Bnei Yisrael to separate from their spouses and not to approach Har Sinai, Ves Kol HaMishpatim, and all of the Mishpatim that we got, and the Zayin mitzvahs, and the Sheva mitzvahs Bnei Noach, and Shabbos, Shenitnu Lahem b'Mara, all of this was given to them in Mara, V'shebechamisha b'Sivan, and it was on the fifth day of Sivan. So what's going on here? Okay, the Rebbe is saying, yes, there's such a thing as ein muktam u'char b'Torah, but there has to be a very compelling reason. So what's going on here? Beis, utmiya noisefes b'seder haparshios lefi perish Rashi, and there's another bewildering, problematic aspect of how Rashi is teaching these events were ordered. If you go according to the other mefarshim, the other commentators who opine that what we're looking at now, basically Perek Chavdalid of Parshas Mishpatim, happened after Matan Torah. So Masha Nemar la'achri zeh because of Vayave Moshe v'yisaper lames kol divrei Hashem v'kol Mishpatim koyel hamishpatim v'adinim shebeparsha zu Parshas Mishpatim shenistaba behem Moshe boy bayim shel Matan Torah v'tekel la'achar mikein masrom l'Yisrael. If you're going according to other mefarshim, then what it says here that Moshe came and he told the Jews, all the words of Hashem and all of these statutes, that this is talking about the halachas, this is talking about the dinim, the mishpatim that are in this parsha, that Moshe commanded them that day, the day of Matan Torah. He got them from Hashem, and immediately he conveyed them, he imparted them to Bnei Israel. Omnam Rashi, however, Rashi bepirush al Torah, but Rashi in his commentary perish shahachukim hamishpatim shebeve'ela hamishpatim nemru leMoshe ba'arbaim yom harishonim shebehem hayabahar. Rashi opines that all the chukim and all the mishpatim that are in the parsha of Ve'ela Mishpatim were told to Moshe in the first set of 40 days that he was on top of the mountain with Hashem. Ulafi perish zanimtza. So based on Rashi's understanding of the chronology of the events, it's understood shabein shnei sipurim oidas ha'achanas at chamisha b'sivan l'matan Torah, that between the two stories, the first being between the two stories, both about the preparations that were made before Matan Torah, hifzik hakosov, there is an interruption in the trajectory of the psukim in the Torah. So what happened on the fifth day is not just interrupted by what happened on the sixth day and Matan Torah itself. According to Rashi, the preparations that began on the fifth day are interrupted not only by what happened on the sixth day, in great detail, Matan Torah, etc., but also interrupted by all the things that were imparted later to Bnei Israel that Moshe learned during the 40 days that he was up in heaven, the first set of 40 days. V'yeser al kain, and even more, la'achrei kol hadinim v'mishpatim sheparshas mishpatim, after all the laws and all the statutes that are in Parshas Mishpatim, ula'achrei parshas vel Moshe amar alei al Hashem, and after this pasuk aleph and pasuk chav, in parak chav dalet that we're starting with, misupar b'siyam parsha. So a number of psukim later, pasuk yud beis, in this section, again, vayomer Hashem el Moshe alei elai hahara, come up to me, come up the mountain to me, v'hayesham, and you'll be with me, ve'etna lechas luchas avad eden, and I'm going to give you the stone tablets. Vayakam Moshe got up, vayal, he went up, el har, to the mountain, vahi Moshe bahar arbaim yom v'arbaim laila. And he was up there 40 days and 40 nights. And this too happened immediately after Matan Torah. So basically what we're left with, what we find, Lefi Perish Rashi, if you're following the trajectory of how Rashi gives us the order of events, Shagam hemshach inyanu shebizman zeh aliyas Moshe lahar lachrei Matan Torah v'shihiyasa shamar b'yim yom, that also these events that happened, Moshe going up after Matan Torah to Hashem, and his staying up there for 40 days, Moifia b'Torah, appears in the Torah, behefzek v'diluk. It appears as an interruption. It appears as something that's jumped over. And then at the end, you find something that happened much earlier. First, in most of Parshas Mishpatim, we have what Hashem taught Moshe on the mountain, and only after that, the hefzek haparsha, after a hefsek, an interruption of almost an entire parsha, we go back to what happened to Lifnei Matan Torah Moshe Amar Lei. We go back to something that Hashem said to Moshe before all of this, which has come up. And after that, Niskar Tzivoy Alei Elai Hahara, Al Minas Lekabel Azaluches. And then we have the second time where it says, Hashem says, come up to me to the mountain so I could give you the luches. V'kiyum Tzivoy Ze Alidei Moshe. And then the Torah tells us that Moshe, in fact, listened to this instruction, to this commandment. So we have a dizzying and bewildering presentation of events that is going in zigzag fashion, not once, but actually twice. And so, of course, the question is why? In other words, it's true that you can't read the Torah like a history book and expect that things should be there in chronological events. But the Rebbe says, but that's not the norm. While it is true, it is not, generally speaking, the MO of the Torah. There has to be a reason. When things appear like this, there has to be a very good reason. Seif Gimel. V'yesh loymar habir bazeh. And this is always a cue that the Rebbe is going to tell us something new and completely novel and radical. V'yesh loymar, you might say that an explanation is as follows. The Matan Torah is chatshu shnei inyanim. The Rebbe's chiddush here is that instead of reading this as a narrative, and the main event is that we got 10 commandments, the Rebbe says, actually, it's not so simple. Because Matan Torah is comprised of two novel events. HaKadosh Baruch Hu nasan es HaTorah, es mitzvahs v'halachas HaTorah. The Eibusher gave us the commandments and the laws of the Torah. He gave this to Bnei Yisrael. And then Beis, al yedei zeh, and through this, nasu Bnei Yisrael avdei Hashem. The Jews became the servants of Hashem. Like it says, you will serve God on this mountain. Ubalash Rashi, and this is a sikha that we did, Shenasu Yisrael Mishubadimli, that this is when Bnei Yisrael became subjugated to Hashem. Ushnei pratim elu hitgish HaKadosh Baruch Hu miyad b'diburei harishon l'Moshe b'midbar Sinai b'sheni b'Sivan. And actually, now that the Rebbe points it out, you can see that both of these aspects are underscored immediately on the 2nd of Sivan, when Hashem says, Koi Soimar Lebeis Yaakov v'Sakil Bnei Yisrael, etc., Atem Re'isem, etc., Va'ata im Shemoya Tishvu B'Koili Ushmartem Es Bisi Ve'yisem Li Segula. Right away, when the Eibusher introduces the whole idea of Matan Torah, Hashem says, if you will listen to my voice, if you will hearken on to my voice, and you will keep my covenant, and you will be to me an Am Segula, a beloved nation. Hainu, meaning, Shenidrash mi Yisrael, that what Hashem is looking for is a two-part situation. Aleph, Shemoya Tishmu B'Koili, Lishama L'Tzivuye Hashem. First of all, Hashem wants us to listen to his commandments. And Beis, Ushmarti es brisi, and you should keep my covenant. Two things. So in other words, this is not a literary device. This is not an alliteration. This is not poetic license. It is literally two things. Listening to keeping my commandments and keeping my covenant. That I will make with you regarding keeping the Torah. That what I want here, Hashem says, is to enter into a covenant with you. Ubekach nasu Yisrael kishurim va'agudim b'kutchabrichu mishubadim li. And it is via this covenant, it is dafka through this covenant, this relationship. In other words, it's not just God becomes our supervisor and is giving us a task list. No, Hashem wants to enter into a relationship with us. And through this bris, through this covenant, we become connected with Hashem. we become Mishubadim. And if you remember that Sikha, where the Rebbe says that Mishubadim means that there's no daylight. There's no degree of separation. It's not just Avdei servants that get a list of things they have to do. If they finish quickly, they have a longer lunch break. They have a recess. No. Mishubadim means we are in a relationship and there is no recess from this relationship. וזהו תוכן החילוק בין שתי הפרשיות בנוגע לסיפור האחרונס למתן תורה בפרשת ישרי ופרשתנו. And now the Rebbe says, once you understand, this is the pivot. And once you understand this, you can understand the difference, the conceptual difference between these two parshas when it comes to the story of preparing for Matan Torah. Because Parshas Yisrei and Parshas Mishpatim are talking and are each concentrating or zooming in on one of these two facets. B'Parshas Yisrei medubar be'ikar oides nesinas mitzvahs haTorah. In Parshas Yisrei, in the main, it talks about Hashem wanting to give us commandments. Aseres HaDibros, the Ten Commandments, Val Derech Zeh Parshas Mizbeach, Shehi Hemshech Yasher L'Matan Torah. We also get laws about the altar and the certain sacrifices they brought, which was an immediate continuation of Matan Torah. K'moshe Kasav, like it says, Atem Re'isim, etc. Lo yisasun iti mizbeach adama ta'aseh. Hashem says, now that I gave you these 10 commandments, and you've seen me, and you saw me revealed in a way that never happened before, now you're going to make an altar, you're going to bring sacrifices, and so on and so forth. Ulefichach. And because Parshas Yitzrei is in the main about what Hashem wants us to do, Gam Sipar Hachanas L'Matan Torah Ba Oisek Be'ikar B'Mitzvah Shenasan Kadosh Baruch Hu L'Yisrael K'Hachana L'Matan Torah. So Yisrei is in the main about the mitzvahs that Hashem wants to give us and the mitzvahs that we did in preparation for Matan Torah, which are mitzvahs Prisha V'Hagbala, the mitzvah to separate from our spouses, to not engage in marital intimacy, V'Hagbala, and the mitzvahs surrounding how the mountain that the Torah would be given on had to be cordoned off and people couldn't approach, etc. Umitam zeh hudgasham tzivei Kadosh Baruch Hu l'Moshe al dvar mitzvahs elu. And so in Parshas Yisro, what's being underscored is Hashem's commands to Moshe regarding these commandments that Bnei Yisrael had to keep. Val derech zeh mesiras hamitzvos al yedei Moshe leYisrael. And also, so Hashem saying to Moshe, and then Moshe saying to Bnei Yisrael. So Parshas Yisrei is about what we have to do. And this last part about Parshas Mishpatim, in Parshas Mishpatim, is about who we become. Masha'en came by Parshas Mishpatim, medubar des inin hasheni b'matan Torah. But in Parshas Mishpatim, in this last aspect of Parshas Mishpatim, it's about the second component, the second facet, Krisas Habris Ben HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael. It's about the covenant made between Hashem and Bnei Yisrael. She'al yada, that via this covenant, Nasu Yisrael mishubadim li. Bnei Yisrael becomes subjugated to me, Hashem. V'nez na'aseh, and this is done alidei hapratim v'ha'pa'ulos hamusuparim kan, and this is effectuated. This covenant is effectuated through the details, through the events that are told here. Hakabbalah shel Yisrael ba'amiras na'aseh v'na'aseh v'nishma, that the Jews said, yes, we will do, and only then will we learn. Ksiva Sefer Habris, the writing of something called the Book of the Covenant, Binim Mizbeach Vakravas Karbanos, the building of the Mizbeach and offering sacrifices, Hazaz Damim, the sprinkling of the blood, V'gam Mitzvahs Prishas V'Hagbala. And now the Rebbe says, in brackets, V'gam Mitzvahs Prisha V'Hagbala Shechazra V'Nishnisa Kan, and even the fact that the Torah seems to be repeating something that was said in Parshas Yisrei, and was a preparation for Matan Torah, which is, again, the idea of separating from spouses and not going close to the mountain. Why does the Torah circle back and repeat what has already been said in Parshas Yisrael, and seemingly is really out of order here? Because there is something novel. Haprat shel amiras naaseh, hakabola shel Yisrael, shehem muchanim u'mushubadim lekabel al atzmam as divrei Hashem. So coming back to that, those dual instructions: one, separating from spouses; two, not going too close to the mountain, is repeated here to bring our attention to the fact that there had to be preparation for both facets of Matan Torah. There had to be preparation for getting the dibros, for getting the commandments, and there had to be preparation for what we were going to reciprocate with, that we were going to say nasa, that we were going to say, yes, we want to enter this covenant with you. Dalet. Ubazeh, and with understanding this, and with understanding what the Rebbe has introduced in Seif Gimel, in the third part of the Sikha, this novel understanding of the two aspects of Matan Torah, once you get that down pat, miyushav bepashtos hemshach seida parshas v'nyanim sheparshas Yisro and Mishpatim, then everything else falls into place like dominoes. How the Torah gives us this order, which seems to be a very dizzying, zigzagging out of order. But once you understand what is meant to be conveyed here, then we understand. First, the Torah deals with everything concerning that first aspect of Matan Torah, ubishleimus, and it does so comprehensively. Nesinas mitzvahs v'dinei haTorah. It is the giving of mitzvahs and the laws of the Torah. There are hamitzvah shabo kachana l'matan Torah. First, you have the commandments that came as a preparation for receiving the Torah. Again, mitzvahs prisha v'hagabala, separating from spouses and not coming too close to the mountain. Then you have matan Torah. You have the giving of the Torah, seres hadibros, the Ten Commandments, the Decalogue. Then you have Parshas Mizbeach Haba Tekev La'achar Matan Torah. Then you have concerning the altar and the offerings, V'chein ve'ela Mishpatim. And also as a continuation in this trajectory are the Mishpatim. Most of this second parsha, Halachas HaTorah Shalimed HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Moshe Bahar B'Arbaim Yom. These are the laws of the Torah that Hashem learned with Moshe on the 40 days following Matan Torah. And only after the Torah finishes dealing with this first aspect, then the Torah begins to delineate everything we have to know about the second facet. What is that? Entering into a covenant with Hashem. Ba'al pizeh miyushav, and once we understand this, is also reconciled. Then we also understand why in this last portion of Mishpatim, the Torah talks twice about Moshe going up. It's confusing. Once we have it in Pasuk Aleph, and once we have it in Pasuk Yud Beis. The Torah says twice that Moshe went up. Ki af ba'arbaim yom shebehem shah Moshe b'Har Sinai hayu shnei inyanim elu. The Rebbe is teaching, why does the Torah have to tell us twice Moshe went up? Because it's not just in the Matan Torah that there are two aspects, But even in Moshe spending 40 days and 40 nights with God, there are also these two planes. There are these two aspects. There's this binary. Aleph, HaKadosh Baruch Hu limed Moshe zachukim hamishpatim shebeva'ela hamishpatim. First, there's Hashem imparting the information. Okay, there's the what to do. And then Beis, there's ve'etna lachem as luchais ha'even. And then the second aspect of Moshe going up is that Hashem says, I'm going to give you these stone tablets. This is who you're going to be. This is not about what you're going to do. It's about who you're going to be. Why? Umataris nasinas haluchis bepashtas. And the Rebbe says, simply speaking, why did Hashem give Moshe sapphire tablets? Loi kedei lilmoid bahem. These were not meant to be utilitarian. Nobody was actually going to use these tablets to glean information. Ella heyosim luchos ha'edus. They were going to be the tablets that give testimony to the fact, luchos habris, that the Jews entered into a covenant with Hashem. Haluchos mishamshim ke'edus al abris shekaras HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael b'matan Torah al shmiras haTorah. These tablets would serve as testimony. They testify to the covenant that Bnei Yisrael entered into at this time of Matan Torah. Ubazem muvan masha inin arishana now. And through this we understand that the first thing delineated above, Barboim Yaim, concerning the 40 days that Moshe spent with Hashem, ve'ela hamishpatim, misupar behemshach laseres hadibros parshas mizbeach. So now it makes sense that everything that comes in the beginning of Parshas Mishpatim, the first 6 aliyahs, is basically a continuation of the Aseres HaDibros. It's the information. It's what I want you to do. V'inyan alei elai hahara ve'etna lachez luchas ha'even, and then the inyan of Moshe going up, or the second time that it says Moshe come up, that's b'kesher le'inyan hasheni sheb'matan Torah, krisas habris. That alludes to the second aspect of Matan Torah, which is, you're going to be my people. I'm entering into a covenant with you. Hey. V'yesh loymar. Now the Rebbe is going to train his microscope on the words of the Rashi Aleph, Parak Yudalet, that we did, that seemed to be very simple. Rashi says, under the words Vel Moshe Amar Alei, let's look at the Rashi one more time. Parsha zu nemra koydem aseres hadibros. Rashi makes a statement that you should know that this pasuk begins a section that is actually out of place. This was said before the Aseres HaDibros. It was said B'daled B'Sivan, on the 4th day of Sivan. That's when Hashem said Alei. So the Rebbe says, now that we understand what's going on here, now we could see this b'diuk l'shainai. We could see Rashi teaching us this in the specificity of the words he uses. And what are those? Vel Moshe Amar Alei, Parsha zu nemar koydem aseres hadibros. Okay. Now, Vel Moshe Amar Alei is the deeper hamaschil. Those are the words from the pasuk that Rashi stops on. And as the Rebbe never tires of reminding us, that's not just a pragmatic thing. Those words that are bolded are not just to tell you what's interesting to Rashi. It's actually part and parcel of Rashi's commentary. So the Rebbe says there are two things we have to pay close attention to. Aleph, mipnei ma hetik Rashi b'dibra maschil games hateva alei. First of all, Why does Rashi put the word alei, come up, into the deeper hamaschil, into the words that are bolded before his, seemingly the words before his commentary? L'ch'ayra, seemingly, hayadai b'hatakas hatevas ve'el Moshe Amar. It would have been enough for Rashi to say, and to Moshe it was said, or even ve'el Moshe b'vat, just to say ve'el Moshe and to Moshe. Why don't we need the word Amar? Sharei hemshach devarav hu parsha zu ne'emra, because Rashi tells us that this portion was said. So we don't need him to say in the Dibra Maschil, ve'el Moshe Amar, and to Moshe it was said. But certainly, we don't need ve'el Moshe Amar alei. Okay, again, the Rebbe taught that just like the Torah has no extra words, there is nothing superfluous in Rashi. Not even an etc. when Rashi says etc. So that's the first question. Or the first thing that should tell us what Rashi's really trying to teach. And Beis, Ma'u atam lekach, shenokat Rashi b'loshen koidem aseres hadibros, v'loi koidem matan Torah. Why does Rashi cite that this was said before the Ten Commandments and not before the receiving or the giving of the Torah? And even more, B'Perushei al Hashas, in the Gemara, Achein Kasav Rashi Elashem El Moshe Amar Alei V'Gomer Kodem Matan Torah Nemra. In the Gemara, where Rashi treats this pasuk, he uses the term Matan Torah in his commentary. But here he says Aseres HaDibros. And the Rebbe says this is even more pronounced because Vishnei Adiyukim Hanal, Boiltim Yoser, and these two specificities are even more prominently displayed here. Bahashvas Lashon Rashi al Pasuk Zeh, Lil Shoinei al Pasuk Lahalon. When you juxtapose what Rashi does here to what Rashi says in Pasuk Yud Beis. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe alei elai hahara, on the words in Pasuk Yud Beis, and Hashem said to Moshe, "Come up to me upon the mountain." Sheboi Pirish, what does Rashi do there? On the words Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, and Hashem said to Moshe, Rashi says, "La'achar matan Torah." So over here he says, "Aseres hadibros," and 11 psukim later, he uses the term matan Torah specifically. Hainu. Shirashi Aleph loy hetek sham esateva alei. Over there, he does not cite the word alei come up in his deeper hamaschil, in the bolded words that precede his commentary. And over there, he doesn't say aseres hadibros. He says matan Torah. So here, the word alei and the term aseres hadibros are the clues that Rashi is telling us something much more than just the chronology. Ach al pi hanal ef shaloimar. So based on what the Rebbe has explained heretofore, we might say, the Rebbe says, Bekach ramaz Rashi sheparsha zu he has cholos sipor ha'inyan hasheni shebematan Torah. That with the specificities of what Rashi does in this pasuk Aleph, he is signaling to us, he is hinting to us that this is the beginning of the Torah recounting regarding the second aspect of Matan Torah. V'zehu shehidgish Rashi, and this is what Rashi's underscoring, Parsha zu nemra koidem aseres hadibros, that this, what is being told to here now, was actually said before aseres hadibros. What does this mean? Kavanas Rashi bekach, Rashi's intention with this, Eina rak lohidia masai ne'emar hadavar, is not only to tell us when this was actually said, again, about the chronology, ela af lahadgish, but it's rather to underscore Sheparsha zu vel Moshe amar alei, that this portion, and to Moshe it was says, come up, the Teichna and its contents, Nemru oid beterem hiskila inyan harishon anal shebamatan Torah aseres hadibris. That this was said even before what is above it, meaning the aseres hadibris, this came before. I think one way of understanding this, what the Rebbe is doing is he's parsing the terms. Let's look at this again. That this aspect of alei nemru oid beterem hitchil harishain hanal shebematan Torah. So the Rebbe is saying the term matan Torah is comprised of two aspects. Aseres hadibros is only one of those, and what Rashi wants to tell us is that the notion of come up to me, you be my people, this precedes the Aseres HaDibros. And that's why he doesn't use the word Matan Torah. He specifically uses the term Aseres HaDibros because he wants to make sure we understand that first things first. First, there has to be a relationship. Then we're going to talk about what I want you to do. It's similar to what Chassidus explains about the order of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Seemingly, Yom Kippur should come before Rosh Hashanah, right? Wouldn't you think that first you should say, I'm sorry, and you should make everything good, and then you should come with new requests from Hashem? But what kind of business is this? That you start bombarding Hashem, give me this and give me that, and then you say, I'm sorry? Who does that? But Chassidus explains that first Rosh Hashanah comes. And Rosh Hashanah is not in the main about our requests. It's in the main about Hachtaras HaMelech. It's about coronating God as our king. Once we have the relationship in place, then comes the I'm sorry. If we have a relationship, then what I do and what I didn't do is important. But if we don't have that relationship in place, then it's not important what I did, what I didn't do. So Rashi wants to make sure that we know that this aspect of alei, of come up to me, I want you to be mine, I want to make a covenant with you, that precedes the giving of the Aseres HaDibros. V'lechein etik Rashi b'dibur hamaschil games hateva alei, and that's why he puts that word alei, come up, into the dibur hamaschil, even though it seems like that would be superfluous. But it's not. Ki inyan zeh, because it's precisely this, the alei, aliyas Moshe al Hashem, the going up of Moshe to Hashem, hu teichen parshazu. This is the actual content. This is where the story lies. Val derech zeh gam hemshech hadvarim lahalan. And then everything else that's in Perek Chavdala that follows. Ayal Moshe v'Aaron, Nadav Avihu, v'Shivim Ziknei Yisrael. Moshe went up, Aaron, Nadav, Avihu, the 70 elders, Vayira Telokei Yisrael, etc. V'chein Gama Parsha Shalachara, and then even in Pasuk Yud Beis, Vayir Hashem el Moshe Alei Elai, Vayal Moshe went up. All of this is underscoring the same idea. Krisas habris, creating the covenant. Shechein zehu teichen ha'idin hasheni shebematan Torah. Because indeed, this is the second aspect, but it was said before, it precedes the first. The covenant precedes the instruction. Who you're going to be precedes what you're going to do. Shal yidei krisas habris, Olu Yisrael, because through entering into the covenant, the Jews went up, the Jews were elevated, the Nasu Agudim Ukshurim B'Kutshabrichu, and they become connected to, but Agudim means they I don't know, does somebody have like aguda achas means like one thing, one solid thing. Ve'isam li segula, and you become my beloved nation, hiskashrus, va'aliyah Hashem, v'reimamtanu. It's about connection, it's about elevation, it's about Hashem exalting us. Yes, bundle. Thank you, Miri. That was the word I was grasping for quite unsuccessfully. Thank you. Okay. Se'ivav. Now the Rebbe says, and now we're going to understand another whole thing. Valpia bir hanal. And based on this explanation, Beseda Parsha Shel Matan Torah, regarding the dizzying, bewildering, zigzagging concerning the events surrounding Matan Torah, Efshar lahasbir games hatam l'seder Parsha Shel Achrei Parsha Seinu. Now we're in a position to understand the order of what comes next in the Torah, which is Parshas Truma and Tetzaveh. Because l'shitas Rashi b'perusha ala Torah. Because again, going in line with the Shita, with the thought process of Rashi that he shares in this commentary in the Torah. Tzivuy Hashem al melechas hamishkan beparshas Truma tzivuye, I think it's tzivuy Hashem, the commandments of Hashem regarding constructing the Mishkan that we find in Parshas Truma and Tetzaveh, ubahascholas Parshas Tisa, and at the beginning of Parshas Kisisa, Ne'emar la'achar Maisa Egel. Rashi says, although they're found in the Torah before the Cheta Egel, before the sin with the golden calf, but actually they were told to the Jews after the sin. Ela shebaTorah nichtav hadavar kodim lazeh. But in Torah they're recorded before the sin, behetem l'klal, in alignment with the axiom, ein muktam ha'mu'achar b'Torah. There's no chronology in Torah. Va'al pi hanal, but based, the Rebbe says, on what we spoke of before, Seif Aleph, right at the beginning of the Sikha, Harei Adava Derish Hezber, that when we say Ein Muktam Ha'mu'achar b'Torah, that there's no chronological order in the Torah, this is not our first go-to. This is not the default. The default is that events appear in the Torah in the order that they transpired. When that is not the case, then we say Ein Muktam Ha'mu'achar b'Torah, and then we need to understand the reason. Why, in fact, does it not appear in order? So based on what we said before, Lama hiktima kasav es hatzibur yamelechas hamishkan lifnei ma'isa egel. So why does the Torah give us the commandment about building the Mishkan before the event surrounding the golden calf? But the Rebbe says, Ach lefia bir hanal. But based on the explanation that the Rebbe has given us above, Yuvan, it's understood, it's clear. Bekach bikesh hakasuv lahasmich es haparsha shel tzivoy melechas hamishkan l'siyum parshaseinu. With this, the Torah wants to connect the building of the Mishkan to the very end of our parsha, which is about Moshe going up, which is about the covenant that Hashem forged with Bnei Yisrael. And this is similar, the Rebbe says, it's in alignment, al derech divrei Rashi b'tchilas haparsha. Rashi asks a question at the beginning of our parsha, Parshas Mishpatim. What's the connection between Matan Torah and Parshas Mishpatim, this whole list of torts, of civic duties? And Rashi explains, sheyesh kesher smichas ben siyum Parshas Yisrael l'haskalas Parshas Mishpatim, that the reason these two are juxtaposed against each other is that we should understand that even those things that seem logical also came from Matan Torah. So what's the connection between Truma and Tetzaveh with the end of this parsha, Shaboy Medubar Oidas Ha'inyan Hasheni Sheb'Matan Torah Ve'el Moshe Amar Alei El Hashem? What's the connection between building a tabernacle and this aspect of Hashem saying, come up to me, I want you to be my people? And the Rebbe says, Kigmar ushleimus inyan zeh shebematan Torah, habris v'hakesher ben Yisrael l'kutshabrichu. Because the fruition, the end, the crescendo of this second aspect of Matan Torah, the covenant, the connection, the relationship, Nase al Yidei Asiyas HaMishkan, that is concluded with the building of the Mishkan, as it says, Va'asuli mikdash, and make for me a Mishkan, a mikdash, a holy place. Vishachanti b'soicham, and I will rest amongst you, not b'soichai within it, but famously b'soicham within each one of you. Meaning, it's again about this Indian of relationship. I want to be with you. I want you to be mine. Zay. And in this last seif of the Sikha, the Rebbe takes us deeper into a theme that he spoke of constantly when it came to understanding what happened at Matan Torah. Vabir b'zeh b'pnimius inyanim. And what's the explanation when you go deeper? Isa b'medrash, the medrash says, sheb'shas Matan Torah nasu shnei inyanim. The medrash says that it was a two-way street. There was reciprocity, as it were, in Matan Torah. Ha'elyonim yardu l'tachtainim. What was above came down below, as it says, Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai. Hashem came down on Har Sinai, on Mount Sinai. There was this galos ha'elokus milmayla lamata. There was the revelation of godliness that came from above and flooded the below. And at the same time, hatachtoinim yalu le'elyonim. What was below went upwards. Ve'el Moshe Amar Alei El Hashem. And to Moshe it says, come up. It was Aliyas Hatachtain Lamaila. It was the elevation of that which is below upward to that which is above. And that is the difference between these two parshas surrounding Matan Torah. Parshas Yisro and Parshas Mishpatim. Parshas Yisro Ikra hu Matan Torah kefishu hu mitzad elyonim. Parshas Yisro is in the main focused on what was happening from above going downward. Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai. Hashem came down on Har Sinai. Vayidaber Elokim. Hashem spoke. Aseres hadibros chulei. It's all about the effluence from below downwards. Masha Enkin, in contradistinction, but Parsha Seinu Medubar, but in our Parsha, Marsha Mishpatim, it speaks be'ikar mainly Aides Matan Torah kafishu mitzad hatachtainim, about Matan Torah from the vantage of the below. Alei El Hashem. This is so interesting because what the Rebbe is teaching us here is that it's not about quantity, it's about understanding qualifying the themes. Even though most of Mishpatim, the Rebbe is explaining, is a continuation of Yisro. And yet the Rebbe is opining that the main theme of Mishpatim is completely different from Yisro. It's about the below, not about the above. It's about us going up. And now I'm editorializing, which I should never do, but I wonder if that's another way of understanding that Mishpatim is really all about the nitty-gritty of our life below. The ox that gores and the person that, harms inadvertently and so on and so forth. It's about the minutia, the quotidian aspects of life here in this world. But Al Pi Pshat of the Sikha, the Rebbe is saying that becomes that last part of the parsha actually is the theme of the whole parsha. Alei El Hashem, Hakdamas Nasal Nishma, the idea that you put nasa, we will do before we understand, b'nias hamizbeach v'akravas hakarbanas, krisas bris. It's all about our actions, what we have to do. Nasa. Ubir achiluk bin shnei and yanim shebamatan Torah. And what's the difference between these two? That which comes from above downward, and that which has to go from below upward. So from above downwards, Haisgalus Hatsuma Milmaila B'Shas Matan Torah, the awesome revelation of Hashem during Matan Torah, Yeridas Kisei HaKavod Merkava, the descent of Hashem's celestial throne, the chariot, as it were, Hashmiya B'Pi HaGvura V'Chulei, that the whole nation heard Hashem speak, etc., etc., all of this, it was all amazing. It was beyond amazing. But Haisa Lefi Sha'a, it was temporary. It was a temporary event. Masha'en Kain Aliyas Hatachtain, in contradistinction, what happens when you have the elevation from below, Yisrael, Shenischacha B'Shas Matan Torah. When you have the novelty, Shenasu Yisrael Avdei Hashem v'Nisreimim Ubekach v'Reimam Tanu, that Bnei Yisrael become the servants of Hashem. They're elevated in this fashion. He inyan nitzchi. This is not a hit and run. This is eternal. This is lasting. Me'achar shahadavar ba mitzad hatachtoinim gufa, hadavar nikva bahem bepnimius. Because it's an overture from below. It comes from within. Therefore, it becomes something that is established in a most internal way. So it's the difference between giving your child the answer so they could finish their homework and they could go to sleep already, or sitting with them for 45 minutes. Hopefully, at the end of that, they come to the answer from themselves, but now they have it. It's theirs. They own it. So this is something that the Rebbe hammered home over and over and over and over and over again. Kayach atzmai. It has to be with our own kayach. Even immediately when the Rebbe took on the Nesias, the Rebbe says, I don't want anybody to, harbor these ideas, these erroneous ideas that I'm going to do everything for you and you're just going to ride on my coattails. No, the Rebbe says, we're going to do this together. It has to be koyach atzmai. וזהו גם הביר בסמיכס הפרשה של ציווי מלאכת המשכן לעניין השני הנ"ל שבמתן תורה ואל משה אמר עליה אל Hashem. And now the Rebbe comes back and he says, and now we understand, we can appreciate on a deeper level the juxtaposition of this parsha on the parshas that come to tell us about building the Mishkan. They come on the heels of the words Vel Moshe Amar Alei. And to Moshe was told, come up. Ki hachidush v'hayisrain shebahashras hashchina b'mishkan legabe hashras hashchina b'shas matan Torah, because the novelty and the advantage of Hashem's resting in the Mishkan vis-a-vis Hashem's resting during Matan Torah, who Kamoshen is bar ba'avar barucha, like the Rebbe says I've explained in the past. Hashras hashchina b'mishkan ba'al yedei kiyum v'asuli mikdash. Hashem's residing with the Jews, the residing of Hashem Shechina in the Mishkan comes as a result of v'asuli al yedei asiyas b'nei Yisrael. It comes through the overture from below. It comes through the hard work of the Jews. And once this is the fact that the Shechina comes down to rest because of, or by virtue of, or through the agency of people's actions, Azai Hakdusha Nikva'a Bechefza. then the holiness of Hashem is lodged and is 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 nikva is set in the cheftza, in the matter, begeshem, in the material aspect shel hamishkan. Deloi ki b'matan Torah, not like b'matan Torah. Asher boi, because by matan Torah b'mshoich hayovel, when the sound of the shofar ceased, siman siluk hashchina, that was a sign that Hashem's shchina was departing. Hema ya'alu b'hor, lefi shechazar har Sinai lekadmusoi v'nasecho. Then others were able to go on to the mountain because the mountain reverted to its initial status as being mundane rather than holy. The Inyan Zeh, and this concept, Asiyas HaMishkan, the construction of the Mishkan, this is a continuation of that second facet of Matan Torah, that the below should go upwards. That's part of Matan Torah. Kishlei Musa, because this whole idea of what is below being elevated, the whole idea of the covenant, the whole idea of El Moshe Amar Alei, comes to fruition kasher he mashpia gam al isgalus alakus milmaila lamata. Samechet Kavart Rebbe says here, this all comes to a crescendo when it even impacts the way that Hashem revealed from above downwards. Shekiyum v'shachanti b'seicham hanase alidei b'asuli mikdash yeh ba'ofen shel kfiyas nitzchias. That Hashem's revelation from above to below, that, as we know during Matan Torah, was just a temporary thing, but through our overtures we effect that Hashem's hisgalus in the Mishkan should be in a way of kfiyas, of constancy, but more than constancy, nitzchias, eternity. Yet another time the Rebbe